And Kristen's here.
Okay. And I'm going to go back to that, right? Go to that and that. Okay, so I will hand it over, I guess, to, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Loud and clear.
Okay.
Yes.
Can everyone, for those of you that are viewing this, can everyone see the screen that shows people sitting around a table?
Yeah, as long as it still shows people sitting around a table, I can see it.
Yes.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, I'm going to...
This is Wint, Kathy. All I see is a white thing with a cartoon, says new audio and video preview window. What do I do to get to your scene?
Did you, okay, very good. Did you, yeah, okay, you phoned in, that's great. Okay, what you need to do on the agenda that was sent to you, Wint,
Yes.
if you can go to your agenda, there is a link that you're going to hit that will take you into the visual part of this presentation.
Well, I did the thing that, yeah. Well, look, I don't want to take up the time of the meeting about this. I think I did the link. I'm seeing a picture of myself rather than of you all.
Okay, maybe what you need to do on your computer, there might be something that says audio, or sorry, visual, the camera. You want to,
Hit this button.
you want to hit, start my video?
No, it would say he needs to shut the video off.
Oh, you need, okay. It's recording you're being recorded as a video. You want to shut your video off. You're just looking at yourself right now. And so you see the little button that kind of looks like a camera with a slash through it? Oh.
Oh, yes.
He said, oh, yes. Okay. Hit that so you can turn your video off so you're not seeing yourself.
Okay. I guess it'll work. Let's go ahead with the meeting. I'll fiddle with it.
This is Erica, and when that conversation started, the round table cartoon with the people there appeared. So did it just everybody or just me?
Yes, I'm also seeing only the people who are talking.
I'm just seeing a white screen, and whoever talks,
I'm seeing a white
their
screen.
initials come up.
Okay, good.
That's what
So
I'm
we're-
getting here too.
Kristen's on the line.
Okay. I'll share the screen. We're sharing.
Okay, it's back. I see the people around the table.
Yep. It's back.
Yep.
Okay. All right, I think we're going to get started. I think, what do we turn this over to Doug, and then let me go to the next thing.
We don't need a...
So Doug, call the meeting to order.
Yes, thank you, Kathy Howe. I would like to formally call the meeting to order. This is Doug Pirelli. I am Chair of the New York State Board for Historic Preservation, welcoming us all to the 179th meeting under trying circumstances via webinar. We were supposed to hold this meeting face-to-face at People's Island. Because of the COVID-19 issue, we are operating both in that room and remotely, and we obviously appreciate everyone's effort to set this up and effort to participate. The meeting is called to order. I will now ask Michael to do the roll call.
If you're online, please acknowledge by saying yes. Doug Pirelli.
Yes.
Wint Aldridge.
Yes.
Carol Clark.
Yes.
Jay DiLorenzo.
Yes.
Wayne Goodman. Kristen Herron.
Yes.
Yes.
Erica Krieger.
Yes.
Jennifer Lamack.
Yes.
Tom Maggs.
Yes.
Paul Stewart. Chuck Vandry.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, we have 9 members in residence. That's a quorum.
Thank you, Michael. Moving now to the approval of the December minutes. Does anybody have any comments or suggestions to offer for corrections, operating under the assumption that everyone has had plenty of time to review the December minutes?
I would move for a motion to move for the acceptance of the December meeting.
We have a motion to accept the December minutes. Do I have a second?
This is Erica. I'll second.
Michael, would you do a roll call vote for the minutes?
Yes. Pirelli,
Yes.
Aldrich,
Accept.
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
DiLorenzo,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Krieger,
Yes, sorry. Forgot to unmute.
Yes.
Yes.
Maggs,
Yes.
Bandry.
Yes.
9 in favor, no opposed.
Thank you, Michael. Next item on the agenda is board business, and our main issue is the time and location of the December meeting. Michael, can you start that discussion?
Yes, at the last meeting, the board approved 3 dates for the upcoming year, but in the interim, 2 things have changed, and we wanted to confer with the board before finalizing these. The statewide historic preservation meeting, originally scheduled for late March, has been rescheduled for the first week in December. And initially, we saw that as a conflict with our scheduled December 3rd board meeting. But we see this as an opportunity to actually have the off-site meeting, we usually have 1 a year, in Syracuse at the conclusion of the statewide historic conference. The state board meeting would then be on December 4th, moving it a day forward from the previously approved December 3rd, with the preservation awards being included at the conclusion of the statewide preservation conference on December 3rd. That would also mean that the September meeting, which is usually the off-site meeting, would then be held here at Peebles Island. Is there any discussion on either of those 2 dates?
Any questions or comments? Everybody comfortable moving to the 4th from the 3rd of December for our State Review Board meeting?
Yes.
And being in Syracuse.
And being in Syracuse. All right, why don't we do a roll call vote to approve that change?
Pirelli,
I approve of that.
Aldrich,
Approve.
Clark,
Approved.
DiLorenzo,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Krieger,
Yes,
Lemack,
Yes.
Maggs,
Approve.
Bandry.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, next item on my agenda is to allow Chuck Bandry some time to talk about the situation at Lake George. Chuck, are you okay with that?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Although I don't really have anything to add beyond the email that I sent out earlier this morning. So if anyone has any comments or questions, please go ahead.
Would you just give us a thumbnail sketch of that email for the record?
Oh, sure. Certainly. Well, work is, of course, suspended because of the COVID-19 situation. It's hard to keep people who are, working under those circumstances away from one another. But we expect that we have approximately 7 to 9 working days left in terms of finishing recovery. We have, at this point, recovered the remains of at least 30 individuals, and we're beginning discussions of what will happen in terms of reburial.
Okay. Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments for Chuck? All right,
Chuck,
on.
this is Wind Aldridge. Is there an assumption that they're all military figures, or are some of them Native American?
At this point, we're assuming they're all military figures, although some of them may in fact be Native Americans, because there were a fair number of Stockbridge Munsee who were with that army.
Thank you.
Okay, moving to the Deputy Commissioner's report. Daniel, are you available to provide that?
Yes, good morning. I just want to thank members of the State Review Board and staff here at the State Preservation Office for your willingness to switch formats. As noted, this meeting is by conference call and webinar by virtue of suspension of the state open meetings law in response to the COVID-19 virus threat. And again, thanks to all the staff who came in today. At this time, I want to acknowledge that the executive staff is meeting by conference call every morning, 7 days a week. It's very clear the Chamber has basically reassigned, that the agency's primary mission at the request of the Chamber is assisting New York State government with COVID-19 response. State park facilities remain open at this time and are in heavy use as people seek outdoor activities. Several state parks are being used as mobile testing locations for the virus. A number of DHP staff have volunteered to man the State Emergency Management Operations Center, and also is assisting with data tracking and call centers with the Department of Health. So we appreciate staff here stepping up that way. State parks are open. State historic site grounds are open. Most state park buildings and facilities are closed indefinitely. That includes historic houses in the historic site network. All state parks programming, all state historic sites programming has been canceled through the end of April. And programming after that is certainly still on schedule, but certainly at risk, potential risk of cancellation. That call will be made this month or sometime in April. The Division of Historic Preservation has 23 essential staff that are allowed to access our offices here at Peebles, but we have all been strongly encouraged to work from home when at all possible. We have protocols in place to manage workload in each unit, so work is proceeding here. National Park Service staff affiliated with the National Register and Federal Rehabilitation Tax Credit programs are all in telework status in Washington. And at this time, we have been instructed not to forward National Register nominations or federal tax credit paperwork to the National Park Service for review. Our plan here is to queue this work in chronological order as we do our own reviews and approvals and transmit that work when NPS allows. Someone needs to mute their phone, please. There's some noise. I will sign any nominations approved today onto the State Register of Historic Places at the conclusion of this meeting. And then once again, we'll queue the final nominations once they're assembled and organized for transmittal to Washington. Dan McEnany and I were in Washington last week for NICSPO meetings and congressional visits. Our congressional visits ended up being on the last day of public access to the Capitol and congressional office buildings. A number of those meetings were canceled. One occurred by phone instead of in person. So the state delegation was already beginning to sort of close down to open public appointments. We're pleased to report that we secured 15 signatures from the New York delegation for the Historic Preservation Fund sign-on letter. That is the funding source for our annual appropriation here at the State Preservation Office. And we currently have 8 New York State co-sponsors for HR 2825, which enhances the Federal Rehabilitation Tax Credit Program. Although none of those signatures are, at this point, those were all on the bill preceding our visit. We're hoping for additional names going on that bill. For the first time ever, the preservation community that was in Washington last week asked for the full authorization for the Historic Preservation Fund. That's $150 million authorized annually for allocation. That full allocation would mean an increase to $61 million for the state preservation offices nationally, resulting in a potential increase in funding allocation to New York State of about $500,000. if that full allocation is awarded. I will provide some additional information by email as follow-up to this meeting about both the tax credit legislation and the HPF ask. Our meetings included briefings from National Park Service staff and lunchtime comments from National Park Service Acting Director David Vila. NPS reports included a confirmation that the Department of Interior is proceeding with its intended rulemaking regarding the National Register program. We spoke about this at the Planting Fields meeting. At this time, NPS staff are finalizing responses to public comments, about 3,500 public comments. Those responses will be published. And so we will all have a chance to see the NPS or the Department of Interior's response to those comments. Once responsive comments are complete, the proposed rule will move to a 90-day federal interagency review. And on this current schedule, the final rulemaking is expected to be published in the summer of 2020. And that rulemaking will be effective immediately. So there will be no transition time, no outdate for implementation. That rulemaking could possibly be interrupted by lawsuit, and we are discussing with counsel's office, and counsel's office is, we're assembling materials for counsel's office to approach the Office of Attorney General to see about New York State joining with other states in a potential lawsuit in this matter. So more details forthcoming in that regard. Dan, do you want to add anything to that report?
No, in terms of going to Washington, it was successful. We ordinarily generate about 18 signatures. I think 15, considering the circumstances and offices closing, was pretty good. And folks were enthusiastic and obviously very distracted.
So that's the conclusion of my report, unless there are questions.
Daniel, I have a question about state parks. You said that the state parks are open, but some facilities are closed. Can you, if you have a camping reservation, can you camp in a state park?
You can continue with camping. You can continue to make camping reservations at this time. You can also, the agency will be announcing later today a cancellation policy such that you can cancel your reservation with no penalty, no fees for, no penalty fees for doing so, as well as a full reimbursement of the reservation costs. So any camping reservations that are canceled from this point forward will, the purchaser will be made whole, and that should be going up on the agency website later today.
So I'll be able to camp at Allegheny State Park for Memorial Day weekend?
You will have at this point in time, we are not closing campgrounds.
Okay.
And you might have a much wider selection of sites.
Well, I think we just rented them about 2 or 3 weeks ago before all this started, and I think we may have gotten the last 3 tent sites in Allegheny State Park because we waited so long.
Right. Well, I don't think you're under any penalty for delaying a decision to cancel. I think the cancellation policy will, you'll either be in the clear come Memorial Day, or you'll have the ability to cancel at any point in time until then.
Excellent. Thank you. Other questions for Daniel about the commissioner's or deputy commissioner's report? Okay, moving on to the next agenda item, which is Dan McEnany's update on the state preservation plan.
How you doing, folks? I've sort of written out step by step here, but I'm going to go through and give you a status update on the kickoff of our 21-25 historic preservation plan. As you know, and Wint knows well, he's been through the planning process with us. We are required to do a 5-year plan by the National Park Service in order to receive our funding through the Federal Historic Preservation Fund, which comes from money from offshore oil well leases. That's about 40% of our staffing here for the SHPO function, not for the historic sites function. But it ties into the advocacy Daniel and I were doing last week, getting signatures for the appropriation, which has seen some increases under this administration, and that's been good for us. That's 10% of that funds rolls into the CLG grant funding program. So moving ahead there, we're able to give out more money to local municipalities. This plan, we're doing a little differently than how we've approached it in the past. We were very fortunate enough for the first time to have OPRHP's Division for Environmental Stewardship and Planning join us in the planning process, which opens up a lot of different pathways for doing scoping documents, for really communicating with colleagues out there. We're excited about that. Last plan really focused on 50 years of the Historic Preservation Act. This plan we're doing differently, and one of the exciting things is we're not just going to be doing surveys of our colleagues and people affiliated, but we're taking on a rather ambitious general population survey, which is sort of to gauge the attitudes towards preservation and historic sites, and then creating something more tailored for colleagues to gather their opinions. We had included a series of public meetings that we have effectively canceled because of COVID-19. We're going to move to a WebEx platform working with our colleagues in Preservation Buffalo Niagara, Historic Ithaca. We're going to work with both Troy Architecture Project, Historic Albany, and Saratoga Springs Foundation to do one in the Capital Region. We additionally have a WebEx meeting set up through the John Jay Heritage Center. So these will continue to go on through April. The draft scoping document is going to also be released. We have a tight time frame to get this done. We've been talking to the National Park Service, sharing our schedule. I would expect that at our next meeting, I'll have a lot more to say, as I'll be able to show you guys some of the survey results, update of where we are in the process. But this is exciting for us because while the Park Service only really requires us to look at that SHPO function and historic preservation, we're taking a holistic approach, and we're doing an evaluation of how we want to be looking at the historic site system in the future. So I would be happy to answer any questions at this point. This is, under Michael's leadership, going to be some exciting stuff for us to set direction for the next 5 years.
Dan, this is Doug Pirelli. Is there anything that the review board can do to assist in this process, review documents, have input at any stage?
Yep, you're going to get an email from me shortly on the draft scoping document to review. It's a little dry because it's for seeker purposes. After that, I'll be sending you the survey questions, so you can expect some group emails. We expect you to respond. Let us know if you see something or have recommendations, and you'll get a rather large download from us at the next meeting, and we'll set something up for future engagement.
Great, thank you.
This is Kristen. I really applaud the holistic approach, and especially the general population survey. Can we help distribute that as well?
Yeah, one of the shutdown items that is on, we have a new staff member, Fran Stern from the Preservation League, and she is spending a lot of time right now creating a somewhat vast list of colleagues. So I'll be able to distribute that to you also next month, and expansion on that is only going to make this survey and plan that much better.
Excellent. So things like posting it on Facebook and groups, encouraging people to participate, that's good?
Yep, a lot of this is going to be driven by social media.
Excellent. Thanks, Dan.
All right, if that agenda item is done, thank you, Dan. We are prepared to move on to the National Register reviews.
Okay, so first up is going to be Jen Wachowski. Jen, who's phoning in remotely. Jen, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, we're going to mute, so you can, it's your show, I'll advance the slides for you. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Hi, everyone. This is Jen Wachowski calling in from my office. All right, so let's start with University Heights. So the University Heights Summit Park Berkshire Terrace Historic District is significant under Criterion A for community development and Criterion C for architecture as a representative example of an intact residential suburban-styled subdivision in Buffalo during a period of intense development between 1893 and 1939. The historic district is located just south of the University of Buffalo South Campus at the very northeastern corner of the city limits. While the area had primarily been farmland throughout the 19th century, the announcement in 1909 that the University at Buffalo would occupy the former Erie County Almshouse sparked a massive wave of development in the area that drove the district's settlement over the next 2 decades.
Okay, wait, I'm just checking back in. If someone maybe somebody needs to mute, we're getting some background noise here, please. So if you're not muted, please mute your phone. Thank you.
Three major subdivision projects emerged in the district simultaneously in the years surrounding World War I. University Heights in the north, Summit Park in the center, and Berkshire Terrace in the south. Although different individual developers were responsible for subdividing lots and constructing houses in each subdivision, they did so contemporaneously by building residences in the same architectural styles with similar building restrictions and aimed to attract the same middle-class citizens in settlement patterns typical of early 20th century America. The district is a representative example of the type of suburban-style residential subdivision pattern that characterized early 20th century American settlement patterns throughout the city, state, and nation. This district contains more than 1,600 primary resources. Many of the area's buildings were constructed in the American Foursquare, Colonial Revival, Bungalow, Craftsman, and Tudor Revival styles. Can everyone still hear me okay? I'm getting a lot of feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you, but there's a lot of background noise. Whoever's shuffling papers or moving their desk has to be careful.
Right, yeah, well, everyone needs, other than Jen, everybody else on the line, please needs to mute. Yeah, that's noises.
Until we ask you to vote.
Yeah, okay, so please, yeah, and maybe it's just reverb, I don't know, but if you could please mute, that would be great. Everyone mute, and we'll let Jen.
Kathleen, there should be a way for you to mute everyone in WebEx. I've been able to do it before. This is Kristen.
Okay.
Hopefully.
Okay.
Jen, is it your dogs?
No, it's not my dogs.
Yeah, okay, well, we have to figure out how to do that.
Keep moving.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
All right, can we move to the next slide, Kathy?
We're trying to mute everyone.
Okay.
We're experimenting with what Kristen said, so hold on.
Don't disconnect.
Oh, we're muted?
We had to mute because we were. Yeah. Audio connection. Okay, well, we can't figure it out, so we're just going to continue. I'm sorry. If we get some time, we'll study up. Okay, sorry, guys.
All right, so that's all right. So the period of significance for the historic district begins in 1893 with the establishment of the Main Street streetcar in the district, and also the year when the Summit Park Land Company, run by Eli Northrup and Charles Winspear, began developing the northernmost end of the district. It ends in 1939 as the majority of buildings have been constructed in a pre-World War II settlement pattern with a cohesive collection of early 20th century styles by that time. Today, the district represents a cohesive built environment with uniform lot sizes, setbacks, and a unified aesthetic sampling of residential architecture typical of the early 20th century. The USB Historic District retains the spirit of the original design as an early suburban middle-class residential neighborhood established simultaneously by multiple developers during a building boom in the first 4 decades of the 20th century. I just want to say we've received a lot of support for this project and have already started receiving both homeowner and commercial tax credit applications. We have letters of support from Erie County legislator Lisa Chimera, University District Common Council member Rashid Wyatt, and the University Heights Collaborative. We also have a resolution from the Erie County Legislature supporting the addition of the district to the state and national registers. We have 2 letters of objections from 3 property owners. So this is the University Heights Summit Park, Berkshire Terrace Historic District. Are there any questions?
Okay, so now if anyone has comments, questions, you should probably, well, when we'll have to vote, you'll have to unmute, please.
All right, this is Doug Pirelli. I have a question.
Hi, Doug.
Given the 2-to-1 ratio of contributing to non and the large number of non-contributing properties and a look at the very good map, I just want to hear your opinion on the density of this district, how well it holds up, if there's fringe areas that you ever considered removing from the district, or is it bounded by a geographic neighborhood space that is more important than deleting any fragmentary sections along the margin, if that makes any sense?
Okay, well, there's a lot to unpack in that question. First of all, this was a result of a historic resource survey that actually was much larger than this particular neighborhood. It actually crossed over Bailey Avenue, but it was found that Bailey Avenue really had no architectural integrity and sort of formed a natural boundary because it was an early sort of north-south thoroughfare in the neighborhood anyways. So really the history of these 3 major neighborhoods tied together really strongly from a historical standpoint. I would note from a contributing and non-contributing standpoint, in the overall property count, that includes things like garages. So, so the numbers may be skewed a bit higher in the overall property count just because they also take into account things like a non-contributing 1960s garage or something like that. The actual number breakdown, I think, came to about 30% that was non-contributing, but those buildings that were non-contributing still had a lot of the same sense of scale. As you mentioned, the density here is really high. There were very few vacant lots in this particular neighborhood. So I think overall the history is strong. I think the architecture is strong. And I think it kind of holds together pretty well as a cohesive neighborhood group.
Great. Thank you for that explanation. Any other questions? All right, Michael, would you do a roll call vote for this nomination?
Well, first I need somebody to make a motion.
Oh, we need a motion to accept this nomination.
This is Jay. I'll make a motion to approve.
Second?
This is Tom.
Okay, now for the echo, I just want to say this. I believe the people who are echoing are probably using both the telephone connection and the internet connection associated with the video.
Oh, God, that's awful.
That's terrible.
That's pretty bad.
All right, it might have something to do with microphone proximity to the receiver.
Sounds like a duck from Maine to me. It sounds like something from Maine.
I resent that, Tom.
I'm still looking for a second for that motion.
Second, this is Tom Mack, second.
Got it, okay. Those in favor, Wint Aldrich.
Yes.
Carol Clark. Carol?
Yes.
Thank you. J.D. Lorenzo.
Yes.
Did I hear Wayne on the phone earlier?
No.
Yes, I vote yes.
That's what I thought. Thank you. Kristen?
Yes.
Erica?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Tom, you already made the motion. Doug?
Yes.
And Chuck Bandry?
Yes.
Motion carries 10-0.
Okay.
Moving to Barcelo.
Okay, Jen.
All right. Yeah.
Jen, this is Kathy. I neglected to print this one out, so just tell me when you want me to advance, please. Okay. Okay, so everyone.
Should we mute again?
Yes, everyone please mute, okay? We're all going to hit that mute button. Okay, want everybody muted except for Jen. Thanks all.
Okay. So the Barkalow Manufacturing Company factory is a locally significant industrial facility associated with the Barkalow Manufacturing Company, an internationally recognized furniture and tool manufacturer for over 60 years. Next slide. The factory is locally significant under Criterion A in industry for its association with the Barkalow Company, one of the Old First Ward's major industrial employers that for 64 years, between 1899 and 1963, used the factory as its main production facility and corporate headquarters. Next slide, please. The company was founded originally in 1896 as the Barkalow and Ball Company and specialized in producing metal bed frames, cribs, hand tools, and forged metal goods. Its products were used internationally across industries, and the company was a major supplier of metal parts for the Curtiss-Wright Airplane Company during World War I and the COTS for the Army in World War II. Next slide, please. Today it is most notably known for its production of the Barca Loafer and Barca Lounger, popular reclining chairs that became part of American pop culture. The Barca Loafer and Barca Lounger were the creation of Hungarian inventor Anton Lorenz, who spent over 2 decades studying posture. Lorenz's research showed him that the ideal position for the human body was in repose, and used his data to design a chair that would allow users to sit in perfect relaxation. In April 1946, Barkalow started to produce Lorenz's reclining chairs in the Barkalow Manufacturing Company factory. The Barca Loafer became an instant hit with consumers, and the company shipped over 100,000 chairs in less than 2 years. Soon after releasing the Barca Loafer, the company developed the Barca Lounger, an upholstered reclining chair. The disposable income of the growing middle class had increased dramatically after World War II, and reclining chairs fulfilled emerging ideas of comfort, style, and technology for those looking to update or furnish new homes. Next slide, please. The factory is also locally significant under Criterion C in the area of architecture, is a good representative example of industrial architecture and engineering innovation between the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The company first leased property at the site in 1899 and began expanding and adding new buildings throughout the 1920s until they eventually subsumed the entire block. Like many factories, the Barkalow facility is typical in that it reflects various building campaigns, several different construction methods, and a plan reflecting internal functionality over exterior aesthetics. In addition to technological innovation and advances in the form and material of the physical structure, Barkalow's factory designs also employed the latest developments in fireproofing methods, power supply, lighting, and material handling, including cranes, elevators, and conveyor systems. Next slide, please. The period of significance for the Barkalow Manufacturing Company factory begins in 1899 with the construction of Building 1 and ends with the sale of the business and factory buildings in 1963. This era encompasses the long history of the Barkalow Company, from its beginning in metal bed frames and mattresses to World War I aviation manufacturing, and eventually to its transition into a household name in residential furniture and hand tools. This period also encompasses all major architectural building campaigns during the company's growth and expansion. So this is the Barkalow Manufacturing Company factory. Are there any questions on this one?
Any questions on Barkalow? Motion to accept? Was that a motion?
Somebody just, I think that was the Lakeshore Limited that just went by. God almighty.
Well, I'll move to accept the Barkalow Manufacturing Company nomination. Is that Doug Pirelli?
Oh, this is Win. I'll second it.
Whoa.
Whoa.
I got
Erica will second it.
I got Wint as the second.
Yes, that's Win.
Okay, roll call vote. Wint, yes.
Yes.
Carol Clark.
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
Wayne.
Yes.
Kristen.
Yes.
Erica,
Yes.
Jennifer,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Doug,
Yes.
and Chuck.
Yes.
Okay, 10 in favor, 0 opposed. Please mute your phones, and we're now up with Jennifer Bestworth.
All right, good morning, everyone. Jennifer Bestworth here. Got a good slate of projects for you, mostly from my former territory. My new territory is a little bit smaller, but lots of good things here for you today. So first up is the Rugby Congregational Church. The church is significant under criterion A in the area of social history for its association with the growth and development of its congregation and the surrounding community of Rugby. Developed from farmland in the 1890s, Rugby became home to a mixed community of Americans and first and second generation immigrants. A group of Anglo-American, German, and Scandinavian families founded the congregation in 1906. As the congregational denomination claimed no authority over local churches, they seem to have chosen it to form a congregation that would best fit the needs of a diverse community made up of people who had previously attended multiple other denominations. In response to the neighborhood's growth, the congregation purchased a parsonage and constructed the church building between 1926 and 28. The church is additionally significant under criterion C in the area of architecture as a rare ecclesiastic example of the work of prolific regional architect Dudley S. Van Antwerp, who designed over 500 homes in addition to institutional buildings, designed this neo-Gothic church in 1927 near the end of his career. The Rugby Congregational Church appears to be Van Antwerp's only surviving substantial non-residential work. The church is designed in a simple neo-Gothic style, incorporating elements of the late Gothic and Tudor Revival styles, including buttresses, pointed arched windows, and interior Tudor arches. The church is a simple but refined building, reflecting Van Antwerp's effective design philosophy and the means of the working class congregation. The church, which promoted a diverse method of brotherhood and unity, particularly under Reverend James Fife Lawton, who was known for his missionary work in the South Pacific and outreach to the local Jewish community. The church remained an important cultural anchor in Rugby through the mid-20th century. This is a sacred sites project, and we do have a letter of support from New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission. That's the Rugby Congregational Church. Are there any questions?
Didn't we have something like this at our last meeting? It looked very familiar to one that we had, I think, in Brooklyn or near Brooklyn. It was under, and it looked like the congregation had been gone into a more Caribbean population. Is that, it just seemed very similar.
There's that one in Staten Island. We haven't had one in Staten Island. We've had a lot of churches coming in from Brooklyn through sacred sites, and a lot of them have had changes to new congregations. So I'm not having anything come immediately to mind right now, but
is he possibly talking about Bay Ridge?
Maybe.
I mean, that's next on the docket here.
That's the same congregation.
Okay. I'd like to move it.
Any other questions?
It's stretched out like that.
Okay, motion from Tom. Any second?
Carol Clark, second.
Carol Clark, second.
Roll call vote. Wint.
Yes.
Carol Clark.
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
Wayne.
Yes.
Kristen.
Yes.
Erica.
Yes.
Jennifer.
Yes.
Tom.
Yes.
Doug.
Yes.
And Chuck.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the vote's 10-0 in favor.
Thank you. Moving on to Bay Ridge.
All right. The Bay Ridge Reformed Church is significant under criterion A in the area of social history for its association with the history and growth of the congregation and community in Bay Ridge, and under criterion C as an impressive example of ecclesiastical design with elements influenced by the arts and crafts, medieval Bible, Romanesque style. By the mid-1890s, Bay Ridge had grown large enough to support a church. This agreement within the community between older residents and new arrivals led to the nearly simultaneous founding and construction of two separate churches a block apart, one Presbyterian and one Reformed. The Reformed congregation hired architect Arthur Bates Jennings to design this church. Jennings is best known for his multi-turreted churches, which included elements of French Romanesque design. Jennings originally designed the church to have an auditorium plan, as shown here, but the final building was somewhat smaller, reflecting the financial constraints and spatial and programmatic needs of the young congregation. Rather than having a larger church, the congregation's building committee prioritized finding a way to build granite instead of the more affordable brick and sandstone that Jennings had planned for. After learning of another church that had used granite paving stone as a cladding material and inspecting it in person, the building committee insisted on doing the same. This was a distinctive design choice which set the church apart from everything else in the neighborhood, especially the new austere brick Presbyterian church, and conveyed the congregation's financial stability. It also gives the building a picturesque arts and crafts flair that brought it attention in local newspapers and stone trade magazines. The Reformed and Presbyterian congregations maintained a healthy but friendly rivalry. In 1918, the congregations made the decision to merge. They renamed themselves the Union Church of Bay Ridge, took the Presbyterian denomination, and used the Reformed church building. In 1924, this addition was built to accommodate the expanded congregation. Got a few images of the interior here, just to give you a sense of the space. It was reoriented a little bit with that addition for more space. The combined congregation and its pastors became known for its liberal, political, and religious views. Reverend Dr. John Paul Jones featured in Time magazine for his reenactment of Reverend Martin Niemöller's arrest, and in newspapers against communists and other unpopular minorities. Union Church was also the first posting for Reverend Margaret E. Howland, the first woman to be ordained at the Brooklyn-Nassau Presbytery. And I know she's moved on to other work in this part of the world and is still active as a pastor. This is another project put forward by Sacred Sites, and we have a letter of support from New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission. Are there any questions on this one?
Okay, questions on Bay Ridge Reformed Dutch Church? Anyone? Motion to approve, if no questions.
So moved, Carol Clark.
Second?
Jay.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Michael.
Okay, roll call. Wint.
Yes.
Carol Clark.
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
Wayne.
Yes.
Kristen.
Yes.
Erica. I think that was a yes. Jennifer.
Yes.
Tom.
Yes.
Doug.
Yes.
And Chuck.
Yes.
Another 10-0, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Moving on to Hopewell Junction Depot.
All right. Hopewell Junction Depot is significant under Criterion A in the area of transportation for its association with the development of the hamlet of Hopewell Junction and with the broader pattern of railroad development and competition in Dutchess County. The Dutchess and Columbia Railroad was built between 1867 and 1869 from Fishkill Landing, now Beacon, to Canaan, Connecticut. In the early 1870s, the railroad constructed a depot near Hopewell. The small frame depot soon became the center of a substantial rail yard serving 3 different railroads. The rail yard became the focal point of the thriving hamlet of Hopewell Junction. New residential and commercial development followed, including the construction of a Borden's Creamery. The railroads continued to be the primary economic driver in the community into the 20th century. In response to a decline in passenger traffic, Passenger service was suspended in 1933. After that point, the depot was used for freight and tool storage. After the line was abandoned and the tracks were pulled up in 1984, the small depot remained as a reminder of the former bustling railroad. Due to the changes around the depot, you may have noticed as you review the nomination that this is one of the rare cases where we have an arbitrary boundary drawn pretty quickly around the station. There's industrial around, but really this is the only remnant of the railroad. During the mid-1990s, Bernard Rudberg and Richard Taylor began organizing local citizens to restore the depot. In 2012, the depot, which serves as a visitor center for the adjacent rail trail, opened to the public. It is maintained and staffed by the Hopewell Junction Depot Museum. This is one of the waiting rooms. Here's the restored telegraph office. And here is one of the other waiting rooms. So that is the Hopewell Junction Depot. Are there any questions?
Hello?
Yeah, questions? Hopewell Junction Depot.
I'd like to move it. This is Tom.
And this is Wayne, and I'll second it.
Okay.
Roll call vote. Wint.
Yes.
Thank you. Carol.
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
Wayne.
Yes.
Kristen.
Yes.
Erica. Erica. Jennifer.
Yes.
Tom.
Yes.
Doug.
Yes.
Chuck.
Yes.
Come back to Erica. Are you on the line?
Oh, it's good to have more than 7.
Yeah, it's 9, and I'd say 1 abstention.
Okay. Next. Go ahead, Jennifer.
All right. This is the Deo Du Bois House. It is locally significant under criterion A in the areas of agriculture and industry for its long and shifting use as a farm, mill, orchard, and ice business, and under criterion C in the area of architecture as a distinctive example of a stone dwelling constructed in the 18th century regional tradition associated with Ulster County's Huguenot American heritage. The boundary for the nomination includes the farmstead core, which is outlined in yellow on the map, the remnants of the mill and ice pond across the street, and the remnants of the historic orchard. So we're going to rip the Band-Aid off and get this out of the way early. The Town of Lloyd Historic Preservation Society purchased the building from the Scenic Hudson Land Trust in 2015. One of their first tasks was to stabilize the house, which required the removal of the porch. I understand that they plan to restore the porch in the future. Don't worry too much. After that, they stopped any work so the building could be fully documented. The 2-room plan house was built in 2 stages in circa 1778 and circa 1790, and is typical of the 18th century stone house architectural tradition of Ulster County, which features story-and-a-half single-pile gable roof forms with 2- and 3-room plans in a linear arrangement. Stone houses were the best houses in the community, representing a small percentage of overall housing stock, which was characterized by small, 1-room plan, wood frame, and log buildings. They were the status objects of prosperous farmers, merchants, and in this case, industrialists. The Deo family owned the mill across the street. A few interior photographs for you. These reflect the removal of some mid-20th century additions and materials by the Historical Society. So we're seeing the south room in the original section of the house, and here's the same room looking the other direction. During the mid-19th century, after the house passed out of the Dubois family, it received a picturesque update with the addition of a central gabled dormer and an ornate veranda on the facade. The excess outbuildings on the property reflect its historic agricultural use, largely by the Chance family during the 20th century. They operated an income-producing farm, orchard, and ice harvesting operation. The house overlooks a mill pond, later used to harvest ice. Foundations of an ice house are visible to the far side. See them in the left, sort of center left of the image, if you look. That is the Deo Dubois house. Are there any questions?
Can I get a sound check? Can you guys hear me? This is Erica.
We can hear you now.
Okay.
All right, so any questions about the Deo Dubois house or a motion to accept?
This is Kristen. I move to accept.
Motion by Kristen, second.
This is Chuck Vandry, I'll second it.
Chuck Vandry, second. Michael?
Roll call vote. Wint.
Yes.
Carol.
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
Wayne. Wayne.
Yes.
Kristen.
Yes.
Erica.
Yes.
Jennifer.
Yes.
Tom.
Yes.
Doug.
Yes.
Chuck.
Yes.
10-0, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Moving to, is it Cherny's Bakery?
That's Cherny. So this one is delightful, so I'm very glad to be bringing it to you today. Cherny's Bakery is significant under Criterion A in the areas of social history and commerce for its role as an important business and a social and cultural center for the predominantly Czech community of Bohemia during the 20th century. Trained at the Redkova Guild School of Bakers, Joseph Cherny immigrated to Bohemia in 1894 and lived in the Yorkville neighborhood of Manhattan with his wife Ottilie before settling in the Czech neighborhood of Winfield, Queens. By 1915, Joseph was working in the bakery of fellow Bohemian Michael Nemec. He purchased the business by 1918 and gradually expanded it. The business was a success. Cherny began to consider building a new bakery in Bohemia, a Czech community in Islip during the late 1920s. I love this image because it still reads very faintly on the wagon, Michael Nemec Bakery. So this must have been very soon after he made the purchase. Founded by fellow Bohemians, the community of Bohemia offered the potential to buy land and construct a business and home for the growing Cherny family. After first establishing a small store in the area in 1932, Joseph built a bakery on Smithtown Avenue, which celebrated its grand opening in October of 1933. So this one and a half story section that you see here was the original build. Is the bakery and the workspace and the storage. We'll go inside later. The bakery was so successful that the family was able to build a large storefront and residence addition to the bakery in early 1935. And here's a historic image from the roof showing the rear workyard. The garage is still there. And certainly that was a very important part of operating this business, having space for all of these delivery trucks. Joseph and Ottilie's 4 sons and 3 daughters played an active role in the operation of the bakery, creating baked goods, working at the counter, and operating delivery vans. Cherny's Bakery quickly developed into an important community center and a tangible part of the region's culture through its offerings of traditional baked goods, including bread, sweetbreads, and pastries. The bakery frequently donated cakes and treats to school and community events. So as you read in the nomination, the bakery closed circa 1973 and was reopened by a family member from 1981 to 1997. It's been closed since, but as you can see, the interior spaces remain super intact. All the equipment is there, and it's clearly, even though unused, a beloved space for the family who still owns the building.
What I find fascinating about this is that this was all done during the Depression. I mean, what courage to take on a project of that size, given the conditions of the country at that time. It's certainly inspirational.
And the bakery was very much in high demand by the community. They were very happy to welcome in the Cernys. So I think I get the impression from everything they did very well despite the Depression. There's a few spaces of the residence part of the building, modest, but remains intact to its historic period. And while the community has changed due to 20th century suburbanization, and Bohemia isn't as bohemian as it once was, Cherny has remained an important part of Bohemia's social and cultural fabric. Obviously, due to the changes in our meeting, we don't have visitors. We would have had a descendant attending for this one. This was primarily written by the family, and I sort of helped them expand it out and added context. This is a very, very special thing for them.
We were also planning to feature Czech baked goods at lunch, but you all missed out on that.
Don't tease us now. I think that this is a really exemplary social history and commercial statement that's written for this. You can tell that very interested people are behind the presentation of this forum, and it's really, really nicely written.
This is a super piece.
Yeah, really,
I'd like
really
to move this. I'd like to move this if you would like to. Is
that Tom?
This is Wind. I'd like to second and just make the comment that I too would think was very moving. Wonderful that these people were going back to Czechoslovakia after the war, and they must have celebrated the Velvet Revolution and the advent of Václav Havel in 1989. That's not mentioned in the nomination, but there must have been a pretty terrific celebration there. Thank you.
That's a great point, Wynn.
Okay, roll call vote. Wint.
Yes.
Carol. Carol Clark.
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
Wayne.
Yes.
Kristen.
Yes.
Erica.
Yes.
Jennifer.
Absolutely, yes.
Tom Maggs.
Absolutely.
Doug.
Yes.
And Chuck.
Yes.
Another 10-0.
All right, thank you all very much.
I love that.
Last but not least, something else entirely different and interesting. The Al Held Home Studio is significant under Criterion B in the area of art at the national level of significance for its long and central association with modern artist Al Held. Best known as a pioneer of hard-edge abstraction, Held was one of the most ambitious American painters of the mid-20th century. By the time he purchased this property as a summer studio in 1965, Held had already become recognized as a leader in the generation of post-abstract expressionist painters and was lauded by critics and contemporaries alike. The agricultural building of the former Beechford Farms property had large spaces and high ceilings that would allow him to pursue his interest in the large-scale works that became central to his artistic identity.
Continue on so that when we recover all of these companies.
Whoever's talking offline, would you please mute your phone?
Held was familiar with carpentry and construction and wasn't daunted by the work required to turn the building into living and working. He claims the largest barn is his painting studio, the second cow barn for the house, and turned the bull barn into his wife Sylvia Stone's drawing studio. The creamery became staff housing. When Held purchased the property, he was working on his series of letter paintings, which were characterized by high key colors and flat shapes based on letters of the Roman alphabet. Held preserved many original details of the barn, including the metal cupolas, wooden ventilation ducts, hay and straw chutes, and ceiling track and pulley. Held loved raw architecture of the large cow barn, which he called my shart. He was enamored with the hayloft's majestic high ceiling, elegant joinery and rafters, and tightly spaced floor. Held's major modification to the space was the installation of 12-foot-high homosote walls to support painting and the removal of extraneous interior storage. When Held returned to New York City in the fall of 1967, he started painting exclusively in black and white, initiating a monochromatic series that would last for 12 years. Back in Boyceville in the summer of 1970, Held completed his most significant commission to date, a 90-foot-long mural for the Empire State Plaza in Albany. So if that last struck any, was familiar to you at all, it might be because you walked by this. Cycle through a few images of some of the buildings here. This is the barn that Held transformed into his house. I have a few one interior image for you. When I was there, I met with his daughter, and she talked about how Held, sanded all the ceiling himself, and there was dust and straw and everything coming down through the floors. Beautiful space. Here's an image of the creamery, which is still used for staff housing. And here's the drawing studio and its interior. In 1974, the Whitney Museum held a mid-career retrospective of Held's work, solidifying his position as a major artist. His international profile continued to grow during the decade, and his career flourished. In the summer of 1978 in Boyceville, Held started to abruptly paint in color again. The first return-to-color canvas, ED1, traveled nationally in an exhibition of abstract geometric work. As the Boyceville studio increasingly became Held's primary residence and workspace, he was able to execute a large number of public commissions, including the 55-foot Mantegna's Edge in 1983, the lobby of an apartment building in Dallas. His 25-foot-long The Third Circle, painted in Boyceville in 1986, was displayed at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine before it was installed at 7 World Trade Center. The period of significance for this nomination extends to 1992 to reflect Held's modifications to the property to make it his ideal workspace, primary residence, and to recognize his continued significant work. Held died in 2005 and was lauded in obituaries by national and international publications. Since that time, the property has been the headquarters of the Al Held Foundation. Again, we would have had Daniel Blasco, the executive director of the foundation, here with us under normal circumstances. I believe he's probably listening in. I don't think visitors were able to call in the same way. So that's the Al Held studio. I appreciate any questions or comments you may have.
This is Kristen. Jen, I was just wondering if some of the images of the work that had been completed, like the one in the plaza, will be included in the nomination? Because the document we have mostly includes the studio itself.
I hadn't included any of the images as figures in the nomination. Most of those I took from the Al Held Foundation's website, so I can ask them to take images of the artwork as figures.
I was just thinking as a national level, maybe that context would be great.
Okay, any other questions about the Al Held Home and Studio?
This is Jennifer. I'd like to nominate it.
Great. I hear a second.
This is Jay. I'll second.
Okay, roll call vote. Starting with Dick Aldridge.
Yes.
Carol.
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
Wayne. Wayne? Okay. Kristen?
Yes.
Erica?
Yes.
Jennifer, yes. Tom Maggs?
Absolutely.
Doug?
Yes.
Chuck Landry?
Yes.
I'll come back. Is Wayne on? Okay, we'll count that as an abstention. 9.
Yeah, hey, Michael, sorry about that. This is Wayne. For some reason I lost the call. I just called back in, so we're good to go, and I vote yes.
Good, thank you. We've got it.
Thank you.
Next up is Kath LaFranc.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I have one property for you today. It's the Uptown Theater in Utica. Everyone see it? This is the Uptown Theater in Utica, which occupies a prominent location on Genesee Street in a neighborhood of residences and small businesses. You'll probably remember that we listed a downtown Genesee Street historic district a few months ago. This is actually a few miles south of that in an area called South Utica. And it's an area of the city that saw rapid development in the early 20th century as the city grew out towards the town of New Hartford. This theater was built in 1927 to the design of Utica architects Rushmore, Jennison, and Pennock, and its form is typical of movie theaters of the period. The facade bay, which contains the lobby and the stores, is brick with stone facing. And the rest of the building is, which shelters the theater itself, is a long rectangular shed constructed with a steel frame and brick walls. The rear elevation is interesting because it's clipped to accommodate the right-of-way for the West Shore Railroad, which actually ran that close to the building, that the building had to be clipped like that. And you can still see the right-of-way in the landscape if you look at it from an aerial view today. The facade presents a unified theater design using a somewhat eclectic combination of forms. It emphasizes a smooth, almost unbroken surface with minimal embellishment, placing all the emphasis on the central entrance, marquee, and main decorative element. Like many theaters of the period, the facade...
Every day, people should post more work. I want to go just in case.
Whoever's having a conversation with their child, would you please press the mute button on your phone? Thank you.
I'd like to hear what he has to say.
All right, so I'll
Kath.
Start that sentence again. The facade emphasizes a smooth, almost unbroken surface with minimal embellishment, placing all the emphasis on the central entrance, marquee, and the main decorative element. Like many theaters of the period, the facade can be divided into 3 parts: the central entrance and lobby, flanked by 2 storefronts. 2 buttresses flanking the entrance rise up on either side of the principal decorative feature, a large recessed Morris-inspired compound arch, which is defined by a series of concentric bands of varying width. And you can see the innermost one carved with a stylized floral motif, and a similar motif is in the parapet. The little grotesques within the arch held the chains for the original marquee, which was replaced in 1941. The storefronts retain their metal trim, transoms, and marble bases, and you can see the hardware for the storefront cornices. So on the exterior, we have a fairly high level of integrity. On the interior, the lobby is fairly intact with the mosaic floor tile, the classical frieze, and the plan of the theater remains. There was a lounge in the little niche behind the popcorn cart there, and that's gone. But you approach the theater from either end of the transverse hall that's right in front of the popcorn, and the hall remains in plan, if not in decoration. Now, the interior of the theater was designed by a Rochester firm, Lusk Studios, and it's nowhere near as sophisticated as the exterior. It was very restrained, using modest Gothic and classical motifs, and there have been a few alterations on the interior and some deterioration, but it's mostly there. It was built for both movies and live performances. However, the projecting part of the stage was shaved off in 1957. The orchestra pit does survive in the basement. The classical decorations are original, as are the 2 arched openings to either side, which screen speakers.
There was also an organ on a motorized lift that could be used for both live performances and movies. That's gone, as are the box seats. All the seats were on one raking floor, but in 1987, it was divided into 3 movie theaters, so the seats in the back were raised on a platform to accommodate 2 new theaters. The interior was very simply plastered and scored to look like stone, and the only decoration was a series of small plaster niches, which were lit with colored lights, and many of those are deteriorated and need repair. The box beams on the ceiling are original and probably enclosed to steel trusses, and though not the most elegant interior, the Uptown boasted that its greatest concern was modern safety and fireproofing. In fact, they said not a scrap of wood was used in its construction. I'm not sure that's true, but that's what they say. All of the interior divisions of recent years have been removed, and the space is in the process of rehabilitation. So back to the exterior. The one change has been the marquee. The first one was removed in 1941, and the second one was lost in a storm in 1971. And when that came down, it also took the original freestanding ticket office. There was a large vertical blade reading Uptown, and that was also lost. I don't know when. But although this is the Uptown's 3rd marquee and it's non-historic, it has been newly repaired, and it was completed only in the last few weeks. It sort of resembles the second one. So the Uptown, built in 1927, appeared right at the change between it was built for live productions, but it was right at the transition to talkies. So that accounts for some of the things like the projecting space, but the absence of fly space, as well as the disappearing organ that could be used for both live and movies. And it also led to some permanent changes, like the disappearance of the organ, the division into 3 theaters. Another interesting thing was built without a parking lot. It was a neighborhood theater. People walked there. And then its long succession of small businesses helped to keep the theater going into the 21st century. When it was built, there were 19 theaters in Utica. Today it is one of 2. And when it finally yielded into the malls in 2012, the Uptown was the city's longest running movie theater. So this is in a CLG. We have a letter of support for the city, from the City Preservation Commission. We also have a letter of support from Assemblywoman Marianne Buttonson, and this project is looking for grants, and even though it didn't make the deadline for EPF this year, it's eligible for some local preservation funding if it becomes listed on the state register. So any questions about the Uptown Theater?
This is Wind Aldrich. It's hard to believe that Utica is effectively without movie theaters. What have we come to in this country? But I would happily nominate it.
Well, right now, all movie theaters in the country are closed.
Everyone's without a movie theater right now.
Good.
And why didn't I get
good point.
I'm trying to tell if the storefront entrance to the movie theater part is also original as the end storefronts are. It doesn't.
No, I believe those are new. And actually, the movie posters were originally on like the buttresses there, and so they have been moved. And the ticket booth was a little freestanding thing out in between the 2 doors. So those doors have been replaced, but they were very similar to that. I had only one historic photo, but it was very bad. So.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Jay. I just wanted to say it's so great to encourage this project. It's a young couple, I think, from Brooklyn that came and are really spearheading this effort. The league gave them a grant from our grants fund to do a feasibility study on the building last year, and then that led to a NISCA league grant from TAG to do a codes analysis. So they're doing all the right things. They're really caring for the building. Getting it on the register is the next step. So I'd be happy to second Wynn's motion.
And it's going to be some kind of a performance space, right, Jay?
Yeah, that's right. They have a really great young group of enthusiastic supporters in Utica that really want to turn this into a performance space, and they have great plans for this building, and they're already using it in some ways. So they're moving forward.
Now, one of the storefronts is the headquarters for the local theater group. It's really a lovely building on the outside. I think love the design.
So we'll proceed to the roll call vote. Went Aldridge?
Yes.
Carol Clark?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Wayne?
Yes.
Kristen?
Yes.
Erica?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Chuck?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, another 10-0 vote.
Thank you all. Nice listening to you.
Yeah, thanks, Pat. All right,
Okay.
are we moving on to the South Bay Mill?
Yes, James Carter, are you there remotely with us?
Yes. Hello.
Great. Hi, James.
Hello.
If you could tell me when to advance for the next
Will do.
slide, that would be great. Okay, the floor is yours.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm James Carter. This is my first presentation to the board, and I'm presenting from my home today. I just arrived back to New York on Sunday from Seattle after 2 weeks away, and the beginning of this week was quite turbulent, as I'm sure you can all agree. So I apologize if any of my presentation comes off a little less finely tuned than I would have liked under normal circumstances. The South Bay Mill in Hudson, Columbia County, came to us as part of the Federal Commercial Tax Credit Program. Built as a soap and candle factory circa 1860, the mill transitioned throughout its industrial lifetime to a knitting mill, a storage facility for reclaimed wool.
Once it gets to this point, they're voting on all of them. But they read the whole thing and they just, you know.
Can someone, whoever's speaking, could you please mute your phone? And then we'll continue. Okay, thank you. Okay, go ahead,
Thank you.
James.
Built as a soap and candle factory circa 1860, the mill transitioned throughout its industrial lifetime to a knitting mill, a storage facility for reclaimed wool, a tobacco storehouse, a spring mattress and bed manufacturing facility, and eventually to the production factory for the first electric vaporizers, one of which you can see in the bottom right photo. The mill now serves as a full-service boutique hotel as part of Hudson's growing tourism industry. Having seen the part one, I'd like to say that I believe they did a quite a good job maintaining the integrity of the building and redeveloping the mill into a hotel. The South Bay Mill meets National Register Criterion A in the area of industry for its significance as a long-lasting industrial building on the South Bay of the Hudson River that emerged during the rapid shift from navigational waterways to railroads as the primary means of logistical transportation in Hudson, a prominent 18th and 19th century industrial city. The period of significance ranges from 1860 with the original construction until the 50-year mark at 1970 due to the fact that the historically significant vaporizer plant occupied the building into the early 2000s. The builder and original occupant of the building was the Gall and Hover Soap and Candle Manufactory, which as a business predated the construction of the mill. Its products included stearin candles and laundry soaps. Stearin, a fatty acid derived from animal tallow and suet, was used in the late 19th century as a cost-effective alternative to the superior performing whale oil, which was beginning to see a decline in Hudson at the time. With the advent of kerosene in 1859, the manufacture of those stearin candles in the South Bay Mill was short-lived, with production ending in 1867. The brothers William and John Hearn of Stillwater established their first knitting facility at the mill shortly after. The brothers went on to form the Union Knitting Company in 1881 and constructed a new mill down the street in Hudson, laying the groundwork for a flourishing textile industry in the city. After the construction of their new mill, they used the South Bay Mill as a storage facility for shoddy, reconstituted wool fabric between 1889 and 1895. The brothers Frederick and Magnus Erbs, two locally prominent German immigrants, used the South Bay Mill as tobacco storage between 1903 and 1911 for their store on Warren Street in Hudson. The tobacco stored in the facility was used to create roughly 90,000 cigars each month at the Warren Street store. Comfy Tight Spring and Bed Corporation operated out of the South Bay Mill in the early 20th century. During their occupancy, they patented and produced a number of steel frame beds and spring mattresses. Next slide, please. Finally, in the early 1950s, as industry began to decline across Hudson, according to the 1940 census, the entrepreneur Max Katzman purchased the vacant South Bay Mill for use as the manufacturing facility for his recent invention, the electric vaporizer. Katzman designed his vaporizer after an incident with an open flame alcohol croup kettle almost caused serious injury to both himself and his young son. The electric vaporizers were used to turn water into steam to help the sick ease breathing and congestion due to various illnesses. Katzman's company operated out of the South Bay Mill until the early 2000s when production moved to Mexico. At the time of closing, it was reporting $500 million in annual revenue and employing some 300 workers, acting as a significant industrial endeavor in the city of Hudson. The building, as it stands today, was constructed in 3 different building campaigns. The first central building, which can be seen in the top right image to the left of the hanging sign, and I believe you could also see on the first slide, was constructed around 1860. The 2-story, 5-bay brick masonry structure with metal-clad 8/12 double-hung windows retains its character-defining 6 pilasters incorporated into the corbelling below the rafter tiles of a gabled roof. A cargo hoist remains above the entrance to this portion of the building. Interior corridors maintain the historic exposed brick walls. The 2-story, 3-bay west portion of the building, which was seen in the first slide and can be seen to the right of the hanging sign in the top right image, was added between 1911 and 1923. This portion of the structure is constructed of brick masonry with cut stone dressings and features 8/8 windows and a flat roof with corbelling seamlessly knitted into that of the older portion of the building. The interior includes character-defining historic features such as exposed heavy timber columns and beams and exposed brick walls. The 1-story east portion of the building, which can be seen in the bottom left image, is the most recent addition added in 1961. This is the largest portion of the building, constructed of concrete block and featuring 15-pane metal factory-style windows, and includes a fixed glass and metal assembly in the 5th bay designed to resemble the overhead door that would have originally existed in the space. The east elevation of this portion presents as 2 stories as it follows the sloping contour of the property. The original steel framing is left exposed on the interior ceilings throughout. Next slide, please. I'll just recap sort of what you're seeing in these slides. On this slide, you can see the rear of the 20th century brick portion of the building to the left and the 1961 concrete portion to the right. Next slide, please. Here you can see the interior of the early 20th century brick portion in what is now the hotel lobby with exposed heavy timber columns. Next slide, please. These are photos of the interior of the 19th century earliest portion of the building. You can see the exposed brick walls here, as well as exposed timber beams in the room ceilings. Or no, I'm sorry, that's backwards. These are interior photos of the early 20th century brick portion of the building. Once again, this time you're seeing exposed brick walls and exposed ceiling beams and mechanics. Next slide, please. Sorry, I had those flipped. Now you can see the interior of the 19th century earliest portion of the building. You can see the exposed brick walls here as well as exposed timber beams in the room ceilings. And then last slide. Finally, we have interior photos of the upper floors of both the early and later 20th century portions of the building. You can see the exposed heavy timber columns of the early 20th century portion of the building now incorporated into the bar on the left, and on the right you can see metal ceiling framing consistent with that seen throughout the 1961 addition. In final analysis, the building's history illustrates how Hudson's economy shifted from navigational trade to diverse industries such as metals and textiles. The mill's first use as a candle factory represents this transition, since the stearine candles made there replaced at the South Bay Mill replaced whale oil as a primary industry in the area. The South Bay Mill was then a launching point for major industry in the area, such as textile and tobacco products. The early 20th century brought decline, but the building served as a home base for successful manufacture of vaporizers, which went on to become a multi-million-dollar global business. So thank you. Any questions or concerns?
This is Tom Banks. I wanted to mention that about 2 years ago, I brought a fellow over from Nantucket named Gib Coffin, and his family, some of his ancestors had been involved in the whale oil business, and he was very curious about this whole site. And I guess he was right. Part of it was available to his family, who they settled in Hudson, coming from Nantucket. It's a nice project. It's really that whole thing has been done very nicely.
Julian, was the Part 2 certified?
It's Part 3 certified. Yeah, it's all approved by the Park Service as a tax credit project. The Part 3 has been approved.
This is Daniel. Hudson has seen relatively little use of the federal tax credit program, and this is a great revival of program use in a very visible location. This is within walking distance of the Amtrak station, and my understanding is the business model is working out quite well. So it's a great project for Hudson. And James, in my opinion, very strong inaugural presentation. Welcome to the club.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Top drawer. That was a very top drawer presentation.
Oh, top drawer.
Okay.
I'd like to nominate that if I could. I think it's great.
Okay, Tom made a motion.
This is Jay. Oh, I'm sorry. This is Jay. I didn't mean to get in the middle of the motions. I can second it if you want me to. But I was going to ask Daniel, if we're not sending these listings on to the National Park Service, like this one for the WIC, how is that going to affect tax credit projects? I know the Uptown's looking to use tax credits. Can they still go through the Part 1, or how's this going to work?
Yes, they're still accepting Part 1s and approving them.
No, they're not.
They're not? No.
They're not accepting a thing until further notice. They have a 3-week backlog in their offices now. Their staff right now can access the building to pick up projects that are already in the queue and take them home. But we are boxing up everything until they tell us to send stuff down. And then even then, we're going to send it down in waves as not to overwhelm the intake office.
Well, remember when we had the furlough? How long did that go on? Like 2 months?
I'm not sure, but this is this situation now. We've been told to hold it for 2 weeks.
No, I know, but I'm just saying we got through the furlough without significant damage.
Well, no, the issue is I'm certain if there's any rule about this is 30 months after the Part 3, and we'll be fine.
Yeah, if I can just add to this one. In this particular one, they did approve the Part 3. They do have 30 months to get it signed, sealed, delivered, listed on the National Register. We still have a bit of a cushion on this one in terms of getting it officially listed on the National Register. We still have a cushion, so I think we'll be fine.
And I expect that there would be some leeway given by the authorities in that situation, given the shutdown.
Or somebody will have to go in and lock things
in.
Yeah. We got a cushion on this one. So where were we? It looks like Jay was a second.
We have Jay as a second, so we're ready to vote.
No, but at some point.
Running down the roll. Wint.
Yes.
Carol.
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
Wayne.
Yes.
Kristen.
Yes.
Erica.
Yes.
Jennifer.
Yes.
Tom.
Yes.
Doug.
Yes.
Chuck.
Yes.
Thank you all. Moving on. Introducing Chelsea Towers.
Yes. Hi. This is also my first presentation, so bear with me.
All right.
This is the Demire Burns Sultan Farm. The farm is being nominated for the state and national register under criterion A in the area of agriculture and under criterion C in the area of architecture as an intact example of farm architecture in the Hudson Valley. Located in the town of Ulster, the 62-acre farm features 3 contributing buildings, which include a circa 1790s New World Dutch barn, a circa 1836 stone farmhouse, and a 1947 bungalow residence. Made up of 4 contiguous parcels, the nominated farm was historically part of a single, much larger landholding. Early records indicate the property was part of an 800-acre land grant made to Williamus Demire in 1688. The land continued to be subdivided over the next 300 years, arriving at its current size in the 1900s. Although the land has changed hands numerous times throughout the generations, the property continues to be used for agricultural purposes today. As indicated by the parcel map here, the two remaining residences and the barn are clustered on an elevated section of land near the center of the historic farm property and are surrounded by rolling agricultural fields to the north and south and the Sopas Creek to the east. The centerpiece of this historic farm is the circa 1836 Burr and Sultan stone house. The stone house is an intact example of rural domestic architecture of the Hudson Valley, built in two phases in the 19th century. Its original construction, circa 1836, was a two-story stone house built into the natural hillside. Originally, symmetry is emphasized with its near square floor plan, uniform bays, a pyramidal roof, and a square corbelled brick chimney rising from the peak. The house was laterally expanded in the late 19th century with a single bay frame addition that matches the depth of the stone house. The low-pitched pyramidal roof was partially reconfigured to accommodate a gabled roof over the addition. The interior of the house retains much of its original spatial configuration with a front and back room connected by an unusually wide side aisle. The front entrance of the stone wing opens to the hall, which is made wider by the absence of a partition that once separated it from its front room. The addition has its own staircase, which separates the front and rear rooms. The basements contain cooking spaces that feature a large brick cooking fireplace and evidence of a beehive oven and long wood mantel. The remaining contributing structures, including the New World Dutch barn, likely built during the residency of the Demire family and expanded several times since then, as well as a 1947 bungalow. The barn, like most, has been adapted over the years to suit changing agricultural practices. Sometimes in the late 19th century or early 20th century, the length of the barn was extended on its north end, likely to accommodate the farm's expanding dairy businesses. The most notable changes coincide with the expansion of the farm's dairy operations in the 20th century. Two long shed additions extending off the north elevation of the barn and two cylindrical concrete stave silos near the southwest corner were also added. The single-story bungalow on the farm was built for the Bogert family, who owned and operated the farm for 91 years. It was the Bogerts who expanded the barn and added the silos to better accommodate the new farm operations. They also adopted the practice of truck farming, which required the production of a variety of crops to sell at local markets. Several other structures were also added to the property at this time, including a 1917 wood-framed bungalow, which is no longer standing. A member of the Bogert family still resides here today. This is the Demire Burton Sultan Farm, has an approved Part 1 and Part 2 commercial tax credit application for the stone house. Any questions?
I think you did a great job for your first shot.
Agreed.
Bravo.
Yes. Any questions? Do I hear a motion?
I'll move, Erica.
And this is Jay.
Erica makes the first motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second. It's Wayne.
Wayne seconds.
Roll call vote. Wint.
Yes.
Carol.
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
And Wayne.
Yes.
Kristen.
Yes.
Erica.
Yes.
Jennifer.
Yes.
Tom Maggs.
Yes, and congratulations to that young professional woman who did such an outstanding job.
Will Teller. Doug Pirelli.
Yes.
And Chuck.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, we have a 10-0 vote.
Thank you. Moving to our last nomination, the Hardinberg Jenkins Farm.
Okay, so lastly, we have the Hardinberg Jenkins Farm, which is being nominated for the State and National Register under Criterion A in the area of agriculture as a historic farm originating in the mid-1800s, and under Criterion C for its 19th century rural domestic architecture in Ulster County, which exhibits a melding of characteristics from both the Federal and Greek Revival styles. The farm is comprised of an 80-acre property located on the west side of the Wallkill River in Ulster. Once part of a much larger 18th century tract stretching from north and west to the Albany Post Road, has been reduced in size by subdivisions for later farm and residential development and is now situated on what remains of the core farm. The farm contains a two-story wood farmhouse of distinctive rural design constructed in 1831, a New World Dutch barn initially built in the 18th century, the sites of a previous mid-18th century dwelling, a private burial ground, and surrounding meadows and fields still used for agricultural purposes. Overall, there are 3 contributing buildings and 3 contributing sites. There are no non-contributing resources for this one. Historically, the farm represents the full evolution of a Hudson Valley farm from its initial settlement in the mid-18th century to its preservation as a historic artifact by New York City weekenders in the late 20th century. The farm was established on a 2,000-acre Guilford patent in circa 1752, and eventually a portion fell into the hands of Abraham Hardinberg. Due to its prime location and conditions, the farm was a major producer of wheat for the international trade. The farm was deeded to various Hardinberg descendants until eventually Rachel Hartenberg married Jenkins and built the house in 1831. They worked the farm producing butter rather than wheat for the next 60 years. Architecturally, the 2-story wood frame Kreins and Rachel Jenkins house is an exceptional example of rural domestic architecture in Ulster County at a time when the traditional stone houses of the 18th century were ceding their elite status to those of modern designs to meet the changing tastes of post-colonial generations. While modern in its form, function, and decoration, it still exhibits residual traditional features. For example, a fashionable symmetrical facade bay, 5-bay facade contains a central entrance opening on a center hall plan, 1.5 rooms deep, which was common in a traditional story-and-a-half houses by that time. On the interior, the center hall plan is nearly 10 feet wide, an extreme dimension believed to be a vestige of the traditional 3-room linear plan of local stone houses from the earlier period. The front rooms are richly decorated with pilastered cornices and elaborate woodworking, including mantels, paneling, baseboards, and door and window trims distinguished by corner blocks and carved insets. The 16 by 20-foot wing contains a kitchen more conveniently on the ground floor, was added about 20 years after the house was built. Typical of kitchen wings of the era, the floor of this wing is 1 step lower than the main section of the house. There are 3 farm buildings grouped northwest of the house, an 18th century Dutch barn, a smaller barn connected to a poultry house, both of which were built in the mid-19th century. The small timber-framed barn is located south of the Dutch barn and has been altered to function as a garage since the 1950s. During the devastating floods caused by Hurricane Irene and Superstorm Lee in August and September of 2011, the small barn was partially dislodged from its foundation and the building was stabilized. The damaged metal roof was replaced with asphalt shingles, and the foundation was improved. New siding was also installed at this time. Today, this building is used as a secondary dwelling on the property. The Dutch barn, New World Dutch barns are rare, disappearing 18th century farm buildings, and an icon of the Dutch culture presence in New York and New Jersey. This 3-aisle plan and prominent gabled facade dates back to medieval times in Europe, indicative of its original function of drying, threshing, and stockpiling wheat. The barn has a wide center aisle where sheaves of cut wheat were hoisted up under the rafters to dry, to be later dropped down and threshed. Side aisles were used to stable horses and cows and store equipment and materials, as well as grain in a tightly closed bin. The Hardinbergs were major participants in the colonial economy, as evident by this large barn. When wheat production declined at the turn of the 19th century due to soil exhaustion, blights, and competition from wheat grown in new settlements in western New York, farming in the region shifted to animal husbandry, specifically cows providing milk for butter making. Dutch barns were adapted to house more animals and to store hay for their feed and bedding. Following this trend, the Jenkins became dairy farmers, and the Dutch barn was enlarged at the north end to expand its volume. The farm continued to function into the In the early 1900s, the property changed hands several times before the 100-acre property was conveyed in 1949 to the Eklund family. Their daughter, Val Osborne, is the current owner of the property. So that's the Hardinberg Jenkins farm. Any questions?
Any questions?
So did you have a sense of the prompt for this nomination?
I think it's primarily honorary.
No questions? Do we hear a motion to accept?
This is Wayne.
I'll
make that
move. This
motion.
is Wind.
Okay, Wint and Wayne are going to move. I'll give Wint the first motion and Wayne the second.
Got it. Roll call vote. Wint.
Yes.
Carol Clark.
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
Wayne.
Yes.
Kristen.
Yes.
Chuck.
Yes.
Erica.
Yes.
Jennifer. Jennifer? We'll come back to Jennifer. Tom?
Yes.
Was that Jennifer?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Doug?
Yes.
That concludes the roll call vote, 10-0, in favor of.
Great. Thank you, Chelsea. That concludes the National Register reviews as well. Does this conclude our meeting?
Is there any additional business?
This is Wind. I'd like to ask perhaps Jay if he has anything new to add to the informing us about the status of the State Barge Canal.
Yeah, this is Jay. I can give you a little bit on that. The league has really been continuing our advocacy with local, regional, and other statewide partners. Really, our focus has been on the continuation of the functioning of the New York State Canal System. And based on what the Power Authority's Reimagined Canal Initiative has proposed, it really looks like when they continue to use the term reuse structures that are in use now, it really makes us begin to wonder what their future plans are. We had a meeting scheduled with the Power Authority that was canceled because of the reason that everything else is being canceled. So we're continuing to move ahead on that front. And we're really starting to do targeted outreach to municipal officials in places where specific projects have been proposed, like whether it's for instance, the pedestrian bridge in Brockport that they have built right on the existing canal structure, which is a National Register canal structure. So we're going to do everything we can to try to avoid any negative impacts to the resources, but I think it's going to be a hard fight. The Urger working group, they formed a little working group that's continuing to meet. We toured the Urger with the New York State Power Authority, the Canalway, and also the New York State Canal Corporation and the Coast Guard, and we feel good about potential new ideas about the Urger. We don't have anything solid right now, but we think that they're starting to think about alternatives to just taking the tugboat Urger and putting it in a separate static location somewhere. So that's all been moving forward. We did have a session scheduled for the New York State Conference, which has been delayed until December, where we were going to moderate a session on the canal system. I think it was still shaping New York's economy, and we were going to have speakers from the Canalway and from Lockport and the village of Pittsford and other places. So we're still moving ahead with all these things. I think we're going to try to keep it in the front of people's minds as we're all hunkered down, and we'll certainly keep you posted on that.
Hey, Jay, this is Wayne here at the Landmark Society of Western New York. Just to jump on that, first of all, thanks to you and thanks to Aaron for, your work on this. You kind of been leading, I think, the charge. And we're happy to, and I think that we sent an email to that effect last week to Aaron that, we're certainly on board with whatever you need for us to do in our region regarding the Brockport and actually a couple of other communities here on the canal in Western New York.
Well, we know we can count on you guys, so we'll certainly keep in touch.
Yeah. Okay.
Jay, this is Wint again, and Mr. Chairman. I just want to remind the board that we are charged by state statute to advise the government on matters of historic preservation. And it may be late in the day, but it seems to me not inappropriate that we take some position, even if it may appear to some to be anodyne, on this subject of the future of the canal. And I'm not proposing that action be taken today, but I do think that before the next meeting, there should be consultation with Daniel McKay and with others to see if we could formulate a resolution that is supportive of continued use and maintenance of the entire canal system.
Wint, that's an excellent suggestion.
I have a draft of something which I'm happy to share, and I think probably I'll, I can certainly share it with the whole group or whatever we think is the best way to proceed. So just let me know what you'd like me to do.
Thank you.
Wint, this is Daniel. I might suggest that the State Review Board formulate an advisory opinion independent of SHPO staff, and that we would be in receipt as an agency.
Yes, I think that is a sound way and an appropriate way to proceed.
I'm just taking some notes here. Now, didn't somebody mention at a previous meeting that the State Review Board could be a consulting party on the canal issue?
Should there be, the State Review Board is entitled to consultation certainly under Section 106, but is also able to consult under 1409. So I think one of the looking ahead on a project-by-project basis, and the Reimagine report did indicate, clearly indicated some projects, provided renderings of such projects. Jay has mentioned one in terms of the Garden Gate in Brockport, at least if not necessarily a component, at least a site of a new pedestrian crossing of the canal at that location, linking SUNY Brockport on the south side of the canal with the Empire Trail on the north side, for example. So anyway, the Reimagine process came up with several early projects. We expect NYPA to advance, and on a project-by-project basis, we will be reviewing those projects once submitted. None have yet been submitted as to whether they would be reviewed under Section 1409 or Section 106. Much, if not all, there's a bit of a caveat, of the canal is considered U.S. navigable waters and would appear to trigger Section 106 if the projects impact the waters of the canal or navigation. There is a pending meeting now moved to webinar between compliance team here and NYPA and executive staff. That will be on the schedule within the next 2 to 3 weeks. John Bonafide, Nancy Herder from our archaeology unit, and Beth Cumming. We are sort of lifting the canal reviews out of the region by region, assignments that staff typically take on assignments on a regional basis. All of the canal reviews will go through that team, Bonafide, Herder, Cumming, for consistency and, of evaluation, 106, 1409, and for consistency of interface and remedy as well. So there's a special team here that will handle canal reviews going forward.
This is Kath. Since it's an NHL, does that get it an exceptional review? Can you bring the NHL people into this?
I'm sure you're up to get a comment on that.
Yeah, so we can certainly, I will discuss that with the review team.
I know, I just thought of it.
Yeah, so we'll report out on how the NHL status may affect reviews as well.
Okay. The only closing comment I have is that if anybody has any minor editorial comments that they didn't want to make while we're live here, send them to Kathy Howe. I plan to do that. Any other business?
I'd like to thank the staff for putting this all together. This was not the easiest task, I'm sure, but I think you did a great job in making this all work. So congratulations.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
That was Erica.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Stop exiting. Stop recording.
Kinda cool.
Now, stop recording.